Sound on my microphone. Thank you, Derek. Okay. Give me one moment. I'm going to go ahead and pull up Zoom grants. And as I am pulling this up, give me just one moment.
Just one quick question. You said
yes.
It's in Zoom grants library, right?
I'm sorry, say that one more
time. It's in the library?
Yes, it's in the Zoom grants library tab. And so when you go to start your application, you'll want to log into Zoom grants. If you already have an existing account, you'll want to go in and select the program. Again, there's two specific programs for hard costs. There's the nonprofit quasi-government application program and then the jurisdiction application. When you log into Zoom grants, we have the programs should be live today, so you should be seeing those programs available. If you're not, please let me know. It may be something I just need to turn on. And give me just a moment. I am going to pull up. And just for a reference, I'm going to pull up the 24-25 CDBG hard cost projects for nonprofits and quasi-government program. So I do want to let everybody be aware, sometimes Zoom grants can be a bit slow right now because we're utilizing this room and with the hybrid technology and stuff. I've noticed that there can be a delay in the program, the system. But I do want to just let you be aware that depending on when you're accessing Zoom grants, you may have issues with your web browser automatically pulling up the information. So. Let me, okay, there we go. As this is pulling up, I am going to just reference again the tabs in the application. Tab 1 will be the application summary. So again, you will identify what the organization name is, the address, and the UEI information. Tab 2 will identify, does the funding fit your project? So here you'll see a list of eligibility questions. And you will want to make sure that you are looking at this and checking any of those boxes that apply. I don't think I stated this earlier. I do apologize. For hard costs, the minimum dollar amount is $25,000. We do not have a maximum amount that you can request. Here you'll identify, again, the agency type and what that eligible activity is. So, for example, if you are a nonprofit, but you are submitting a housing rehab, you would click on this one. Every activity needs to be tied to a national objective. Again, this is who you will be serving. So for an area benefit, you will be required to submit a map of the service area. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Karen. And again, this is section 2. When we're looking at that national objective criteria. If you are providing a service and it is tying into a housing activity, for example, if you're doing rehab, the national objective would be a low to moderate household. And just be aware the maximum amount eligible to be funded is based on a pro rata of the LMI clients who will be receiving that direct service. Go ahead and scroll down. Here we just kind of ask that you identify how long your agency has been, providing services in operation. We do ask that you indicate whether any of the following apply to your agency. Example, if there's been any staff turnover, if there's been any issues with a negative finding in a fair housing complaint or any other similar action. And then we do ask that you explain why if the answer is yes. Here we ask how you identify and track revenues and expenses. Go ahead and scroll down. And again, we ask that you indicate which of the following will apply to your agency. The intention, the goal here is the period of performance is 12 months. It's a 1-year contract. The period of performance starts July 1st and ends June 30th. The goal is to have activities, projects that are shovel ready in a sense, because we want to make sure that the funding is utilized and spent during that timeline. Each year when we are allocated our funding from HUD, there's requirements, there's those invisible strings that are attached to that, and within the contracts we identify the specific funding source, and so we as the county need to make sure that we're spending down the funds in an adequate manner.
I'm going to add another quick tip. If ever you see in this application an other and you click that box, please put a narrative what that other is. I can't tell you how many times our committee members, it's just one of those things that just rubs them wrong. And you click other, put it, and if anybody gets in there and they don't get the opportunity, please call them in right away so that you can fix it. But fill that in. Sorry.
Another thing I want to point out is if there is some confusion or you're not able to provide that reasoning within this area, you can always attach a document and just reference the application number to provide that additional information on that. So if, as you know, when you're providing this information, if we realize that the character number is limited, please just let us know that you have attached some additional information. That way we can point the committee members to that information. We'll need to know how often your board of directors meet and when the last time the meeting was held. If the project is located in a special flood hazard area. So here we want to identify the location of the activity. So if it's a facility improvement, we want to know the address to that facility. If it's tied to housing activities and you're serving multiple clients and it is based on a low to moderate housing benefit, you will need to identify where those specific addresses are located. Again, you're not going to be aware of that information right now because you don't have clients that you're actually serving. This is an application. But if and when the time comes, depending on the activity, again, if it's tied to a housing benefit, you will be required to identify that. If you have any questions on this, more than happy to, go into more of a deep dive with you on this. Here you can kind of see a hyperlink that will identify. You can go in and search the address. Basically anything that is in a high-risk zone is not going to be eligible. Karen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add to that. If you've been funded in the past, maybe 5, 6+ years ago, if you were in a high-risk zone, what would happen is you'd say, okay, go out and get flood insurance and submit, and that was fine. Let me tell you what happened in 2019. We had a facility that we funded. It was in the zone. That's fine. We now got flood insurance. Great. Let me tell you the education we got from HUD. It wasn't just that year that we needed to have flood insurance. It is in all perpetuity until all of us are dead. So all of a sudden, we either repay that money to HUD, the agency repays that money to HUD, or we have to come up with a plan to pay insurance on this thing at least for the next 30 years. That is, whoever was here earlier that asked about internal policy. That is an internal policy. We're just not going to do it. So if you've got something, you'll have to look at other funds, but we can do soft cost activities, but we cannot do hard cost activities in the flood zone anymore. Yeah.
How do you find out if it's in the facilities in the flood zone?
Yeah,
Or maybe you're coming to that.
Yeah, so here on, and I will make sure to add this as a hyperlink in that library tab because I did not do that yet. So I appreciate you reminding me of that. In the meantime, if you go to this hyperlink, which is connected to question 11 in section 2, that's the website that you would be able to get that information. And then there is a place to upload documents. Here we ask that you attach the bios of the key staff. And then you would go ahead and click Submit tab 2. The way that we have Zoom Grants set up is it will, once you've completed tab 2, it will automatically allow you access to tab 3, which is the application questions.
I'm just all about giving you secret information that you only get if you go to committees. On this tab where it says key staff, this is not only your executive director. A lot of times we only get the executive director or maybe your financial officer or whatever. That's great. But here's our committee members, and they're saying, okay, but wait a minute, they're running rape recovery, they're running services that they need, or they're running a homeless services. That's great to know that the executive director has this great resume. But we want to know about that program director. We want to know what's the capacity of that program director. If Jason was here, who is it that's actually running your rehab program? And let's see what their capacity is. Because when the committee members look at this, they want to say, can you actually do what you say you're going to do? And we know this is reality. We know a lot of times what the executive level what they believe is, what the policies and the procedures and everything that are happening, and then what is happening on the front line with people carrying it out. Sometimes there's a disconnect. So we want to know, the committee members want to know, tell us about your people that are, okay, if your engineering department and you're carrying this out on behalf of the MSD, tell us about your engineers. Tell us about who is doing the legwork or the architecture, whatever. If that's what we're paying for, or that's going to be critical to the program. Doing what you say that you're going to do it. And one other mention on tab 2. How do we use this? It's not only go through to see, is this appropriate for your program? This is a very key part of our risk assessment. HUD requires that we do a risk assessment on every single application before it's funded. So number one, we're going to determine, is it eligible? That's the first thing we look at. Is this even eligible for funding? If not, we're going to pull it out and say, sorry, it's not eligible. Another key thing. We had somebody apply, grant writer just didn't realize it. They applied for less than $25,000. Minimum's $25,000. It got thrown out. It was felt really bad, but the minimum is $25,000. So this is your project eligible? Do you have the capacity to carry out? Can we put this into a risk assessment? And if something in here says they're not quite there yet, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get funded. What it does mean is we say, okay, we know that in order for them to be successful, maybe it's a brand new person or a brand new organization, we're going to need to say, we're going to need to do some technical assistance at the front end, if recommended for funding, to make sure you succeed. And so that's all part of what goes into, or comes out of tab 2.
And again, tab 3 is the application questions. So it's kind of the meat and the potatoes of the application. As Karen had stated earlier, the executive summary, this is information that we pull out of the applications and provide as a narrative within the mayor's book. What the mission and services are. Here, it's helpful to identify what your agency does as a whole, but also identify what the intention is for the activity that you're applying for. If you are currently or plan on coordinating or collaborating with any partners, this is where we ask that you identify that. It is helpful for us to know the roles of each of the partners and the depths of the data that you're sharing. When we're looking at the project status and impact, here we're asking, is this a new program? Or is it a continued program? Are you expanding it? Or if there's another, please explain. And then again, what are the impact of the funding request? How will this affect the clients? So will this, will funding maintain the same level of services that are being currently provided? Will the requested amount allow you to serve more clients than what you're currently serving? Or will it just be the same amount of clients? When we're looking at the timeline, again, this is a tentative timeline. This helps us look at those milestones. So for example, this is information that we utilize in our Gantt chart, and it allows us to look at all of the activities and what the status is of those activities. So this is, again, just tentative information. The goal here, the intention is that 75% of the project costs are billed out by April 1st. Again, that's going to our timeliness on spend down. I have a question, yes?
Yeah, it's actually going back to the previous question.
No, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, just about whether the program's expanding or not. Are you guys prioritizing projects that are expanding or are programs that are at the same level? Are they way same or less than expanding programs?
That doesn't feed into priorities, but I will tell you there's an eligibility issue in CDBG that isn't spoken to a lot, which is particularly on programming. We cannot fund with CDBG funds something that was funded under a different funding source that is maintaining the same level of services. We have to, for CDBG eligibility, have an increased number of services, or it needs to be the same fund. So a lot of this speaks more to the programming for the nonprofits. Pretty much everything that you are going to report on a project, if you're doing a roof, well, the roof falls in, you're preventing cuts, because otherwise you're not gonna have a program. If you're doing, most facility projects or most hard cost projects, you're either gonna prevent losing, or you're gonna have an increase. So, but a lot of this goes back to the programming at the soft cost end, which is we cannot fund something that is not gonna have an increased or new service with CDBG funds.
Great question. And again, looking at our timeline, agency bills HCD for final reimbursement no later than June 30th. Our contracts expire 60 days after the period of performance. However, we do need to have those expenses submitted through Zoom grants and ready for the county to be able to reimburse prior to that contract end date. Here is where you can explain if you have any, if you want to provide a summary on the description of your timeline. Here, for example, if we're doing like a sidewalk improvement, depending on the weather and the timing of where we're at in the year. If it's, already snowing, you're not going to be able to pour concrete. And so there may be some flexibility in when you actually start the activity. But again, the intention is to try and keep us within that time frame of July 1st to June 30th of the following year. On the program capacity, here we're asking how many individuals will request services and how many individuals will not be able to be served by the program.
I want to address something. Now I forget who asked the question, but this goes back to, are you prioritizing those that are serving everybody? Or that is not the intention of this question. This question creates a lot of discomfort with nonprofits. We found that out because it's like you're reporting, well, we're not serving everybody. But if we don't know what the gaps are, we can't factor that into our strategies. This has nothing to do, I promise you, you are not being penalized for showing that you're not serving people. The sole purpose of this question is to help us identify and determine gaps. Because if you are a domestic violence facility and you say that you're serving everybody that comes through, then we hear other things in the community, where's the gap? So this really is, please don't think that this is anything that's going to penalize you. It's to inform us on the needs and the gaps.
Question 10 would be tying into the impact, again, addressing the needs of the program. Here we ask you to describe the program and how you're addressing the needs. Goals and outcomes. Here, again, this is information that we report back to HUD. The intention here is to identify one of those goals. We do ask that you refer to Appendix C. And in just a few moments, I'll have Dan kind of go over a bit more information on that. Question 12 is tied to the eligible activity. So again, depending on what you're applying for, if it is a facility improvement activity, you'll want to make sure to check the facility improvement box. We have question 12 set up as a branching question. So depending on how you answer question 12, it will direct you to the next question. So questions 13 through, I believe, 15 are those branching questions. You may not be aware of or a little confused on what would be considered, a critical need or what would be considered a code violation. Again, let me know as soon as possible. I'll be more than happy to provide the details on that. Here, I believe we're asking for the number of people. Go ahead, Karen, if you don't mind, scroll up. I think we're tying it into the number of people.
You need to look at whatever this says. So if it's businesses, you're talking businesses. If it's individuals, it's people. If it's ADA improvements, that's how many are you doing for sidewalks. Hey, I get back on my soapbox for a minute. This is one of the differences between an output and an outcome. We understand that you're doing 4 sidewalks in the neighborhood. That's what we need to know, and that's what's being, and it's an output, it's a service, is what we're paying for. We still need that because that factors into evaluating financial piece of that, averages. But when you get down here and you talk about other project or program metrics, okay, you did 4 sidewalks, but what does that mean? You've got 600 kids that have access to school, safe access to school. You may have other metrics that you use in your program. Talk to us about that. Just because they're not on our list, that doesn't mean that that's not what's important to your agency mission. So we want you to go ahead and address that. Dan may be able to look at there.
Yeah, just to kind of dive a little deeper into those outcomes and indicators. Again, referring to your Appendix C, which will be your source of truth for all this. Basically, the Appendix C breaks down not just those outcomes and indicators, but also our priorities as the county as well. So kind of use that as your guide for creating your application. It's a very foundational piece, so pay very close attention to Appendix C. To kind of walk through that, it talks about the funding priorities. We dive into expectation of outcomes. It gives you your instructions on how to proceed. And then it shows you the actual, what we call buckets themselves. So we have our 3 buckets being housing programs, economic programs, and basic and foundational needs programs. And so that's where we break down into the actual indicators themselves. So you'll see that the housing programs is, that's where you'll find your housing rehab, your architectural barriers, anything to do with the housing itself and those improvements. Whereas the economic programs are more of your creation of employment, whether part-time or full-time, increased energy efficiency, those kind of things that would boost your economic mobility, for example. Whereas the basic and foundational needs, this is more critical safety issues. This is your life safety issues, code violations, those specific code violations that play into safety and critical needs issues as well. So there, again, these are recently, I believe last year was the first year we had them grouped into these buckets. So it's similar to how we've done it in the past, but it's slightly modified that we think reflects a little closer to our most recent needs assessment data. And again, as a reminder, we're going to be doing some needs assessment in the near future, which again could adjust these buckets in the future as well as we develop our new 5-year plan that'll go into effect 2025. Do you have any questions about these, the indicators or the priorities of the county as far as those all fit together? Awesome.
Thank you, Dan. Next, you'll identify the prioritized populations served.
You want me to address that? Okay, this confuses people. So, question number 17 is talking about prioritized populations. You may click all of them, you may click 3. Just go through and identify who you're serving, and you're going to want to address that in your narratives. If you go through and click all of them, that's fine. But if you're the homeless shelter and you're serving everybody, I mean, all these people are here, but you're really looking at focusing in on unsheltered families or whatever. Remember back to the needs assessment, the priorities and those gaps, and we know that there's a greater number of individuals that are underserved, they're not recovering. Speak to it. So yes, you can check them all, but we really want to see in your narrative, okay, why? Is it you're focusing in on the homeless youth? Is it focusing on homeless families? Why is when you give us your bios and you say, well, here's our program staff and they have all this experience and we can tell you why we're really good at dealing with families or whatever it is. So speak to that. Then you get down here and you're going, well, wait a minute, this kind of covers everybody. This is literally a reporting category. It's just how we bucket them because, so it's primary. You're only going to pick one. And I understand you may serve all of them, but you're going to pick one. What does your mission speak to most? And when we're grouping the applications together, they're going to look at, okay, who's doing substance abuse? Because they're going to kind of compare your applications and we're going to bucket them together. So the first one is about priorities. Speak to that as far as what is your mission? How do you better serve your prioritized population? This is just pick a category who you want your application to be considered with, so that we're not doing, I don't know, maybe rape recovery services. You're going to have domestic violence and sexual assault. We've kind of grouped those together. We just spoke about this, populations, but we're looking at them together. So know that that's the difference between those two.
We will ask that you describe the process that you have in place to evaluate the participation rate of the particular demographics.
Okay, sorry. One more exciting thing. County, our department was under a voluntary compliance agreement for like 15 years, like 12 and 15 or something. I don't know what it was. We finally got the letter last year. Letter's done. We are checked off. We're good. But as part of that, what is our plan? What are we doing to make sure that we're fairly getting access to underserved populations? We want to hear about that, not just will we serve everybody, but a good place to do this is to look at your census data. Okay, and I have absolutely no idea what this number is, but let's say that in this community, 20% are Hispanic. That's wrong. I'm throwing a number on it. Okay, if 20% are Hispanic, in your agency, you're showing that you're only serving 1% Hispanic. Okay, we need to understand what you're doing to reach out because it's not representative of our community makeup. It may be that your specific program is zeroing in on something, and that's why. But if there is an underserved population and you're seeing that information in the census data and you're looking at who you're serving and you're saying, yeah, this is way off. If it's over, great. But if it's under, you need to address it. Because we are addressing it with HUD, we address it in our paper our annual plan, as well as our annual report. And we want to hear from you what you're doing to reach out, not just putting out a what am I saying, brochure. What are you actually doing to get, if you're under Hispanic population, what are you doing to make sure that they have access to your program? We've had some underserving, I'm just gonna tell you, on the Polynesian community. We're seeing really, really low numbers in our programs and what you're reporting, and we've got a lot higher number here in Utah and here in Salt Lake County, so that's on our radar. So just look at that. You might want to pull up the census data and check how you're doing.
Here we will ask you to identify the cost per service and enter the ratio of low to moderate income served. Again, you'll want to reference those tabs. What the funding leverage is. Again, you'll want to reference tab 4 for both of those on what is committed and what is not committed. On the sustainability questions, you will need to describe the factors that are being considered to ensure the long-term sustainability of the program, both financially and non-financial factors.
By the way, we listened in the provider convening. This question right here has more people upset with us than anything else. I have heard more feedback. Where do you find that sweet spot? You need to show that you need the money, but yet you need to show that you're doing well. I understand that what we're really looking for is explain to us, we know that our funding, as we just represented, is going down. So really talk to us about how maybe in the short term this is going to help you as you're looking at your strategizing for the long term.
And if applicable, we ask you to please identify if it is a budgeted line item, if you have any maintenance reserves or repairs.
And if your agency continues to submit applications for facilities, understand the need is there, but if the committee is not seeing that you at least have a plan for how you're doing your ongoing maintenance and repairs, it's affecting the capacity. So at least address whether you're trying to or what you have, because it is an issue if we continue to get a lot of projects that are necessary because of deferred maintenance. So,
Can you give some example?
Yep.
Can you give some example of that?
Yes. So typically you'll see a maintenance and repair budget line item in your budget. You're putting money, maybe it's 3%, whatever it is, you're putting that in there. We have had total agency budgets that, and again, you're not giving us your agency budget, you're giving us a project budget. But you're speaking to us about, hey, we're asking you for a roof this year. And we understand that, we do have a maintenance and repair budget, but it's not enough to cover it. Or this was unexpected for this reason. Or, whatever the reason is, we just want to understand, what is your agency doing, particularly on facilities? If you've got a lot of facilities and you're not saying, this is how we're funding it or trying to catch up on it, to the committee, it's flagging on capacity because they're looking and saying, again, we know that there's not enough funds, and we know that your budget may not be able to accommodate these items that you're asking for, but we're really just saying, help us understand the strategy to a piece of it, whether it's a percentage of your budget, whether you explain this was completely out of the blue, tree came down, not covered by insurance, whatever it is. Just speak to it if it's not in your budget. And if it is in your budget, shoot it. Say, yes, we've got this. This is above and beyond, but just speak to it.
All right, looking at data collection and reporting, here we will ask you to describe your agency's system and the procedure you use to collect and report the data on the race and ethnicity, gender, disability characteristics of the applicant or participants or beneficiaries. The next couple of questions are tied to reference information only. These are not scored questions, but we do ask, does your agency own the building? If your agency does not own the building, do you at least have a 5-year lease? Or you'll identify that you do not have a 5-year lease. Then we will need to identify the age of the property. Is the building 50 years or older? If it is, then it is subject to a historic preservation. We need to, when we are working on the environmental review, there's an additional step that we need to take if it is a historic property. So we identify that at the very beginning. Again, if this project involves, or the program involves the relocation of people or the business, we do need to know that up front, because there are, and Karen, I don't know if you want to speak to this.
Trying to remember the projects. I'll just give you a brief example. Recent year overflow shelter, winter overflow shelter. Funding was awarded for the shelter at the time. The shelter wasn't owned. It was owned by another entity. They closed down, the other entity closed down operations, and then shelter operations were to begin. HUD swooped in. I'll tell you what happens when HUD swoops in. That requires relocation, because people that were living there 2 months prior to this shutdown may have considered it their home, and they were paying for it. So under HUD language, if there's a possible relocation that is going to be imposed, then there's some record keeping that has to happen before that, and we need to show, well, how many people during this month prior, did we document them? Did we get it before those doors shut down? And the implications of that would be very expensive, because we need to go back and not pay for a week or not pay a month. I don't even remember off the top of my head, but there was a long term that was going to have to be paid on the relocation to make sure that anybody that identified that as their residence then had dollars. So this is an important question. When you're looking at your project, if for any reason you think that you are going to be relocating people, let's talk. Let's make sure that we're compliant. We don't ever want to impose a relocation on somebody, but we also need to make sure that we're thinking through that when you're getting involved. So this is an important question.
Great. And question 27 is a application checklist. We ask that you check each of these after you have proofread and completed the associated components of the application. You will need to identify the location of service. So please indicate if the project is located at a single address or if there are multiple addresses. It is helpful if you are doing an area benefit that you identify the census tract here. And questions 29 through 30 will be targeting the prioritization. How will this project meet the needs of the underserved populations? And question 30 will allow you to provide a paragraph summary of your SMART goal. Again, you're going to want to reference Appendix C. And if you have questions or concerns on that, you can always reach out to myself or Dan on that. Looking at tab 4 is the budget, revenue, expenses, and summary narrative. Again, here you'll identify what is committed and what is not committed. And you will identify what the line items that you are requesting funding for.
Whatever you do, do not turn in an application that these two tables don't match. You may not know how you're gonna get there, but you should have some kind of a strategy to it. So it may be completely, if your project's $200,000, but at this time you only have $150,000, including what you're asking us for, then at least put that 50,000 over here in non-committed and tell us where you think you're gonna go get it. This is really important. This sets committee members off, I'm just telling you. And we get at least 2 or 3 every year. And they look at that and say, we have concerns if the numbers don't match what the capacity is to understand the financial aspects. So please make sure that these 2 tables match.
There is a section that you are able to provide a budget narrative. So it is helpful to break down the sources of the revenues listed in each of the categories, highlight any timing consideration for the availability of the funds. For example, if you've identified something that's non-committed, come time that the committee members are reviewing this, if you've identified that in the application, we can come back and clarify and find out, did you or did you not receive those funding? Okay, and then the next section is going to be our tab 5, population served. Again, you'll see the first column is your program year 22 actuals for a number of low to moderate income, and then you'll see by the AMI percentage. On the right hand side, you will see, again, here are the actual numbers. We have number of single female head of household, single headed households, disability served, if you're serving any individuals with disabilities. And then on the right, you'll have the proposed. So one thing I will point out is if you don't have actual numbers, just leave that zeros and let us know within the application why you're putting in zeros. Maybe it's a new program, or let's see. Next section is where you will identify the clients served. We utilize Smart Sheets for the reporting. So each quarter you will, depending on which quarter you're in, we have due dates. You will access that through the library tab. Or excuse me, you will access that through the documents to submit tab. But in the meantime, you don't necessarily need to fill out any information here because that is fourth quarter data. Just be aware that we utilize Zoom grants to not only accept applications, but come time that we are going to award funds and contract with a subrecipient, we utilize Zoom grants to be our source of truth. So we will attach like a executed copy of the contract, any environmental reviews that are tied to that activity. Let's see what else. We also utilize it for reimbursement request. So when you are submitting invoices, once the application is approved, there's a few things that we do on the back end that will allow those post-decision tabs to show up. Right now you won't see those because we're still in the application process. Looking at tab 6, Documents to submit. Oh, sorry, let me go back. Karen's at the library tab.
Now, I'm looking at the time, and we've got about 13 minutes to allow time for questions. If you want to hold over the
Yeah.
and if you want to just briefly go through the library and tell people what to do.
Yeah.
Right. Is it what Amanda was saying earlier, reduce this, because otherwise every time you, so if I hide the library, then I don't have to scroll every time. All right, tab 6.
Okay. Documents to submit. So anything with a highlight that says required, you will be required to upload a document there. If it's not applicable, we do ask that you just upload a blank document, or you can give Karen a really good recipe.
I like this.
I'm not sure why it's showing that the application photo map video is required. I need to turn that off because that's optional.
With the exception of infrastructure, you've got required facility.
Okay.
Some kind of,
That may have been why I did that.
at least a map showing where it's at, so that the committee can identify.
Okay, and I think that's my main focus there. Will you go to the library tab really quick? Like I stated earlier, the library tab has more documents that are being provided than in your packet. For example, I just want to point out, if you scroll down to the, go ahead and keep going. The deed restriction PDF, that is an example. If it's a facility improvement, what that deed restriction will look like. Again, if you're doing a facility improvement, you have to either own the property or have a 5-year lease. Steps for Davis-Bacon, appendix. Let's go ahead and go to appendix A. Yes, please. I just want to point this out, that Appendix A, if you go ahead and scroll up, Karen, this is tied to the compliance requirements. So please make sure that you look over this, and if you have any questions, please let us know.
I will say that in monitoring, we have had a few in recent years that have not had conflict of interest statements. That should make sure that you've got a policy that's written, and that when appropriate, any board members or anybody that has influence, specifically on financial, that you've at least got a conflict of interest statement on file.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add?
Nothing else. Make sure that you upload your documents, and before you submit the application, make sure that you do a final review. Once the application is submitted, it is submitted in the system. We have the frequently asked questions, and again, reference material. We've already talked about Appendix A. Appendix C is how you're aligning your performance indicators. Dan had already gone over that. Other eligibility compliance, we've provided the federal handbook, CDBG specific documents, Davis-Bacon information, and Section 3 information was that handout.
And we can take 2 minutes because I had 3 questions today. Let's just look
Yeah.
at this matrix code.
Okay. So if you want to go to one for an example, well, let's just go ahead and pull up the first one. So if you're looking at doing an acquisition of a real property, here you will see so in the HUD system that we report back to, I have to not only identify what the eligible activity is, the national objective, but I'm tying it in to a matrix code. And when we're looking at the matrix code, for example, an acquisition of real property would be reported as a 01. Here it explains to you what that code is. For example, CDBG funds will be used only for acquisition property. The code is frequently used for the acquisition, public facility, improvement, or housing. Let's go ahead, and if you don't mind, go down to, I think it's like a 3K. Oh, yeah, 03K. So for example, with the sidewalk activities, the way that I report back to HUD, we're looking at activities.
Sorry, while you're talking.
Okay.
Okay, because we're close, look at this, make sure that you can see where your project fits in. You know what I was talking about, and it doesn't look like it's attached here. I'll check it in a minute, make sure that it's in the documents. There's another grid which shows you for each matrix code or activity, what do you report on? And that kind of helps you decide whether or not something is can fall under hard cost or soft cost or where things are. This, everything that we fund has to fit into one of these boxes. We have to be able to check it. The next thing is what are you reporting on at fund date? So if you've never looked at this, I know it looks long and scary, but take a few minutes, scan through and say, oh, wait, this is where I fit. This is where my project fits. Because that's going to be really helpful to you, particularly when you look at how you're going to report on it. So.
And to kind of give you a visual of what that looks like, it's a 2-page document that will show what the matrix code is, and then it will identify the national objective and whether it's not allowed or not.
We
Right.
have about 6 minutes left. You want to do that?
Yeah, do we have any questions?
Better have some questions, we got lots of candy. Goodies.
Or just bring them.
Just double check something, did you say that we should conflict of interest about policy? State our narrative, I think not that.
No, just know that you need to, that was more of a monitoring question. We wanted to touch a little bit on some of the things that come up in monitoring and prepared. Make sure that the board members, particularly have conflicts of interest on file. You should have that on your employees as well. Other things that, always come up is eligibility. One of the things that comes up is that, do you have the right income levels? If you've got one from 5 years ago, does it count? If you're doing, especially if you're doing a client, LMC, so low-on client, somewhere you're doing an intake form and you're identifying what their income is. And household size, make sure that that's correct. And I'm trying to think of some of the other things that continue to come up. I'm gonna give you an overarching, I'll give it with an apology, and it goes back to the question on, what does that mean? HUD speak, CDBG alone, the regs and the applicable and relevant things, even outside the CDBG regs, it is so massive that I don't think there's one person, including all of our HUD reps, who can have all that in their head. So one of the scary things that you'll see when you read your contracts is in there it says, and all other applicable regs and regulations. Just ask us. We may not have the answer, but I'll tell you what we are going to do is if you're starting going through and saying, well, what do you mean Davis Bacon and we need to pay and when is that applicable, or what does it mean income? I'm not sure what you mean by that on determining household income and whether or not they're eligible. Please come and ask us, because if we don't have the answer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and at least get something in writing from HUD on kind of what that means. I believe, and this will go back to positives, I think that I have a team that is so come over, they're incredibly busy, just where we're at right now. But reach out, and if for some reason they're not available, reach out to me, Angela, don't know where she's at, there she is.
Maria.
Reach out to one of us, and you've got all of our contact information. Because if for some reason somebody's just been in a meeting room for the last 12 days, they'll snack in the hallway and say, hey, so-and-so's trying to get an answer. We need to look through your email, find it, and get an answer. So please reach out to us. Any questions?
Did you use, like, in terms of the budget, when you're talking about committed funds, can you use in-kind donations of labor?
Awesome question. So in that budget, you're typically not referring to the in-kind, but when you look at the budget, actually, you're not seeing it on the hard cost, it's only on the soft cost. So yes, if you're actually budgeting that in, go ahead and put it in, and on the other at the bottom, it says other, put in-kind. Let us see where that leveraging is. On soft cost applications, there's actually on the budget template, there's a place that you can put in-kind donations. But yeah, we haven't really set that budget up for in-kind and if you were a Habitat for Humanity, if you're doing something where, that's a huge piece of, you want to tell that story to the committee. So yeah, use the other line, put that in, work it in, just make sure that when you do your revenues, offset that so that you're saying, or for your expenses, making sure they're offsetting on those two different budgets.
And then you can provide that description in
Narrative.
that narrative.
And if you don't have a value that you're actually creating in your budget, you can address it just in the narrative. You can go down to that very bottom section, and even if it's not worked into the numbers, put, hey, but we have 3,000 hours of this, or churches that give this every year. So tell the story in the narrative if you don't have a number to plug into the two top expenses and revenues.
Any other questions? Again, just want to point out our contact information. We will be creating a FAQ. So as questions are coming in, we are going to be creating a master FAQ document that we will be providing. Again, as the information's coming, we'll make sure to provide that most commonly known questions or concerns. I think that's it.
So I'll tell you the kinds of things that excite Amanda too. Next year is the 50th year of CDBG, and so there's recognition and celebration going on all over. So Amanda has full on said, I want to do this. I'll take this on. Is looking at what's the last 50 years? What does CDBG mean to people in this community? What has it done? So she's also going to be looking at this year's applications as well as prior, and saying what are some cool things that we can tell the story about what community development funds have done in our community and the outcome of those. So she's also and she might show some things that come out of this year's. Okay, thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
if you need coffee for the road or anything back there, we appreciate. We will. The notice says on or about the 18th. Today's the 18th. It may be about late tonight before that goes live. But by the end, I would say by the end of the day tomorrow at the latest, you will be able to actually get into the application and start on it. So we just need one final checkbox on that before it goes live.
Soft cost is tomorrow.
That costs tomorrow. Different room. If you come back tomorrow, it's in the other building, bottom floor towards State Street. Called the Fishbowl. On the other side of the cafeteria.